Hey guys, and welcome to this week's Ripple Effect Community Group. My name is Natalie, and I'm on staff with the music for the middle and high school ministries, and we are so excited you're here with us. We've got a couple of announcements that we want you guys to be aware of. So number one, if you're interested in going on this year's ski trip, be sure to check out the link below and let us know. The signups are filling up really quickly, and we'd love for you to be a part of this awesome trip, so be sure to sign up. Number two, if you're a senior and you're interested in going to Passion or you're wondering more about what that is, it's kind of a gathering of 18 to 25-year-olds, thousands from across the country, all in Atlanta for a few days of worshiping and learning more about God. And it's just an incredible environment. So if you're interested in that or want to sign up, then talk to your house leader, talk to your small group leader, and they can get you more information. So now let's check out this week's message from Jeff on Your Move.
What's up, Ripple Effect? I hope you guys are having an awesome time in community groups this week. If you were here last week, you know that we're in this middle of a series called Your Move. It's all about family and kind of going into the holidays. What's it look like to kind of deal with the stress and everything else that comes with spending a lot of time with families, right? And the crazy thing about that is, like, I was thinking the other day about kind of like some of the beginning of some of my like relationships with my friends and stuff. And I was thinking, like, do you ever, if you think back to like the beginning of your relationship with your best friend, right? You guys probably didn't fight a lot, right? Like, I think back to the beginning of the relationship with some of my best friends, and I don't think we fought at all, right? Like, everything was just like wonderful rainbows, lollipops, and unicorns, right? Like, everything was great before you like really get to know someone. And every year I go on this surf trip to Puerto Rico and with my best friends, right? It's about 8 of us, and we go every year, and every year the same thing always happens. Like, I do a lot of, like, I spend a lot of time with these guys, but while we're here in North Carolina and we just kind of hang out and skate together and surf together, we really don't fight that much. But every time we go to Puerto Rico and we're with each other 24/7 for like 8 days in a row, by the end of it, we are ready to kill each other. Like, by the end of it, I am so done with my friends that I don't want to see them for at least like a week whenever we get back. And you guys have probably experienced this too, right? Like, whenever you have to spend a lot of time around people, sometimes it's a lot easier to fight with them. Like, honestly, it's a lot easier to fight with the people that you're close with. Like, your best friend, after time, like, the beginning is always great, but after time, and it can be like this with a boyfriend or a girlfriend too, right? Like, first couple months is awesome, but after a little bit of time, stuff starts to get a little bit more complicated and a little bit more difficult. And it's a lot easier to kind of get frustrated and get in fights with people. And I think what this kind of points out is that the closer you are to someone, the more likely you are to have conflict with them. Right? That's just the truth of it. Like, the closer you are, the more you do life with people, the more time you spend around specific people, the lot easier it is to have conflict with them. Conflict comes a lot easier. You share more parts of your life, so there's honestly more stuff to fight about. And they're there when you make mistakes. They're there whenever you do things wrong. So honestly, we tend to fight a lot more with the people that we're close with. And it brings up an interesting question when it comes to family, because we all know that families are supposed to spend time together. They're supposed to love each other. They're supposed to be close, and they're supposed to do life together and live together. But on the other hand, we know that the more time we spend with people, the more likely it is that we're going to have conflict. And it kind of brings up this interesting tension, because we live in a culture, right, where you get to choose a lot of the people you spend time with, right? Like, you get to choose the people you hang out with for the most part. You get to choose your friends. You get to choose the people that you spend time around church. You get to choose who you're going to marry one day, who you date, right? Like, you get to choose who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. But there is one thing that you don't get to choose, right? And that's your family. You don't get to choose your family. It's not like you're born and you can be like, oh no, this doesn't look good, and you head back, right? That's not the way it works. Like, you're born into your family and you're stuck with them. Like, that's who you're doing life with, for better or worse, whether you like it or not. No one gets to choose your family. There's no test drive or anything like that. And not only that, but you also don't get to decide how your family acts, right? Like, we all have that one really embarrassing family member, or the weird, creepy uncle or whatever, right? And no one gets to pick how how our family members act. No one gets to say, hey, don't do that or don't do this. Like, as much as we'd like to, we really can't control people's behavior. And it kind of brings up another tension, right? Because what happens with family that we don't get to decide and we don't get to pick is there's two things that happen. Is they do this and then you do something, right? So they have an action and then you have a response, right? And kind of the two tensions is what they do and what you do. And in between these two things, right? Mom and dad, stepdad, whoever does something, you have a time to respond. And in between these two things is where the tension lies. It's whenever you get to make a choice. It's whenever you get to make your move, right? And whenever family members do something wrong or make a mistake or make us mad, most of us really like react. Like, there's not that much time in between this and this, in between what they do and what you do. There's not much time, right? They say something wrong, they do something that they shouldn't say, and boom, you do something right back, right? It's like as quick as that. And oftentimes we do not really spend a lot of time thinking about it because it comes so naturally. And it can look a couple different ways, right? Like, mom says something hurtful or rude, so you say something right back, right? Dad, kicks boyfriend out of the house, so you leave too, right? Or whatever it looks like, right? Like your older brother is really mean to you, so you're really mean back to him. He forgets to pick you up, so you erase his video game or whatever, And I know that they're usually not as trivial as that sort of stuff, but sometimes it's a lot more serious. But the point is that we have a chance, right? We have a chance to make a move, and that's kind of what this series is based off of. Is what's your move? So they do something, you do something. What's your move? And the truth is that usually we have reasons. We have reasons for what we do. And again, you could probably sit here and tell me why you're mad at mom or dad or family member or whoever, and you could probably make a really good case for it, right? And the question there isn't whether or not you're right in it, but how did you respond, right? How did you react? Because that's usually what we do, is we react. Something bad happens, we do something back. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why reacting isn't always the greatest thing. And the first is that you create more conflict, right? Whenever we react and they say something mean, so we say something mean back, or they do something messed up, so we do something messed up back, it just makes things worse, right? Whenever you, like, it's never like mom's going to say something mean and you say something mean back and she's like, oh my gosh, you're so right, I'm so sorry, right? That never happens, right? It just gets worse and worse, and it snowballs and snowballs and snowballs. It doesn't make anyone feel better. It just creates more bitterness, right? The second thing is you usually just end up hurting yourself in the long run, right? Because you don't get to pick your family. You don't get to pick who you're hanging around or whatever. Usually in the long run, whenever you're just trying to get people back, no one ends up happy. And the third thing is that you're always going to have a reason. You're always going to have a reason to react. You're always going to have a reason to be angry. You're always going to have a reason to say something mean back, or to get revenge, or to one-up them, or whatever you want to call it. You're always going to have a reason. Right? So the good news is the bad news is that it turns into like this vicious cycle. It turns into this vicious cycle of they do something, you do something, they do something, you do something. But the good news is that there is something you can do to break this cycle. And I'm horrible about this myself, right? Like, if someone makes me mad, it's really hard for me to step back and say, well, I'm going to do something different. And I get that. And you can never change what people do, but what you can change is what you do, because that's the thing that you can actually control, right? And Paul Paul, the apostle from the Bible, right? He wrote a lot of the letters in the New Testaments. In this book Ephesians, which is a letter that he wrote to the church in Ephesus, he kind of talks about this dynamic in the church. And the church in Ephesus, this town called Ephesus, had a lot of problems. They were like super dysfunctional. Like, if you guys in community group were all right now freaking out and fighting about whatever, that's what the church at Ephesus was like. Like, they were going at it. And it was super dysfunctional. And they hit up Paul and they're like, dude, we need help. And he was like, all right. And he writes this letter to kind of promote unity within the church. And and that was kind of the main goal of this letter. It's called Ephesians, right? You probably read it, is so that the church could become more cohesive. So the church in Ephesus could kind of work out their issues. And why is it important for them to do that? It's because God set up the church, and he wants it to be this collection of people doing life together, loving each other, and working together. And the truth is, right, the truth is why this is applicable is God set up family. God set up family, and family is essentially the same thing, right? It's a collection of people who are learning how to do life together, love each other, and work together. So what Paul says to the church is equally valid to kind of how we interact with our family. And this verse that we're going to go through really quick, it's in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. And we're going to kind of break it down into 3 different sections. The first thing that Paul does, where he starts, he says this, he says, be kind and compassionate to one another. Right? Paul doesn't say be kind and compassionate to the people who act the way you want them to act. Be kind and compassionate whenever they deserve it. Be kind and compassionate to the people who are kind and compassionate to you, right? That's not what he says. He simply says, do it. Be kind and compassionate, because that's the best way to live in community, to love each other, and to work together, right? Is by starting with kindness and compassion. It's the first thing he lays out. And this might be kind of corny or whatever, but what would it look like to do that with your family for a few days? To just say, you know what, no matter how angry I get, I'm going to start with kindness and compassion. And I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know it's harder than it sounds, but it could really change things. And the second part where Paul goes is probably the harder one. And being kind and compassionate is difficult enough, but the next thing he says is forgiving each other. So be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other. Paul understood that people were going to make mistakes. Paul understood, just like last week whenever we talked about people are going to mess up, and Paul gets that. So he didn't just say be kind and compassionate and like think that everything's going to be cool all of a sudden. Oh, if we're just all kind and compassionate, well, sing Kumbaya and it'll be perfect. He knows that's not going to happen. So the next thing he says is forgiving each other. Right? Because chances are, even if you decided to start being kind and compassionate tonight, right now, to your family and the people that you do life with, there's baggage there, right? There's stuff that's happened in the past and things that they've done, whether that's brother, sister, mom, or dad, that make you angry, right? And basically what Paul is saying here is to let it go, right? Not like Frozen. And easier said than done, but he's saying forgive each other. All the stuff, like the stuff you think they owe you, the stuff you think they did that was messed up, show them forgiveness and let it go. And it might be one of the most difficult things in the world, because you can't pick your family. You can't control how they act. You can't control what they do. And you know what? They're going to be there no matter what. They're your family regardless of whether or not you like it. Like even whenever you're 18, you move away and you live in wherever away from your family, they're still there. And like I don't live with mom and dad anymore, but we still we still get in fights and we still get frustrated with each other. And there's still times where I have to forgive them or they have to forgive me, right? So you're in your family for the long run. Right. So that second part of forgiving each other is so important. And the truth is that if you really want peace in your family, that's the thing that does it. Because sometimes, like, whenever it's a constant fight, living at home is miserable. It's totally miserable. Whenever it's like you're, scared to come home because you know what mom and dad's going to say, or you know what brother and sister's going to do. You don't want to talk about this, or you don't want to talk about that because you know it's just going to start a fight, right? Like living in that environment can be miserable. But whenever we choose to forgive, like Paul says here, it changes the whole dynamic, right? And it's not even like if they're being forgiving or if they're being loving, right? But it's doing it regardless of what they're doing. And then at the end of this verse is where stuff gets real, because Paul gives you a reason to do it. He gives you a reason to do it, and it makes it that much more difficult, because he says, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. So basically what Paul is saying here is like, you have a reason to do this. You have a reason, even if you're right in your anger and you're right in your frustration. What Paul says is that's irrelevant. Because the reason you're supposed to be kind, the reason you're supposed to be compassionate, the reason you're supposed to forgive is because it's what Christ did for you. It's what God did for you, right? So God, like we've all messed up. Like we've all done, messed up stuff to God. We've all sinned before God, right? But God didn't give us back what we deserved, right? Instead, he sent his son to die for us. And God made the first move, right, in his relationship with you. And we're called to reflect Christ and do that same thing for our family members and for for our brothers and our sisters, right? And the people that we do life with. We're called to do the same thing. And that's the ultimate reason for doing it, right? Is because Christ did it for us, and we're supposed to pass it on to others, including whenever they don't deserve it. And whenever we are right or we are whatever, God made the first move to forgive you, so we're supposed to make the first move to forgive others. So again, you don't get to choose your family. You don't get to choose the people you live with, but you do get to choose your move. You don't get to choose what they do, but you get to choose what you do. And what you do can change everything. So the basis for this message, what I'm really trying to get across, is that we're supposed to fight for forgiveness in our family. Even whenever it's hard, even whenever it's difficult, we're supposed to fight to forgive and fight to be kind and fight to be compassionate, just like Christ did it for us. So that means making moves to forgive the people that hurt you, right? The family member that hurt you, the family member that left and isn't around anymore, the brother, sister, or whatever that said the really messed up thing to you, or spreaded those rumors about you or treat you unfairly. It means moving to forgive them even whenever it's difficult, right? And the great thing about this, even though it's difficult, you don't have to do it alone. Right. And I think we've talked about this before too, is you have, not only do you have your small group, right, and the people around you, but to kind of help you work through these things, but you have God, right? And whenever it comes to forgiving people and loving people, God's on your side in this. And sometimes honestly, it looks like a prayer of being like, God, you know what? Help me forgive, help me love, help me be compassionate, right? Help me be all these things whenever it's so difficult to be them. And the coolest thing about this is that it demonstrates the gospel to your family, and it demonstrates the gospel to the people around you. Whenever they've done something that's messed up, or they've done something that's mean, and let's face the facts, sometimes it's us that does those things too. But whenever those things happen and we choose to forgive and we choose to love instead, that's the gospel. That's what Christ did for us, right? Like we did stuff that was messed up. We make mistakes, but Christ chooses to love us anyways. And we're called to do that same thing. So no, you don't get to pick your family. You don't get to pick the people that you do life with right now, but you do get to pick how you can ask. So follow Jesus's lead and fight for forgiveness in your family. It'll change everything. Like like personally for me, I used to fight with my parents 24/7. Like it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I literally, I wouldn't want to walk in the door, coming home from school, because I knew that it was just going to be a fight. And most of the time it was me that was making the mistakes and not them. And I did whatever I could to not be close to them because I knew that that's what made us fight. But my parents repeatedly, right, they were kind of on the other side of this equation. They repeatedly showed me love. And they repeatedly forgave me over and over and over again. And over time, it changed who I was. And it changed how I acted with them. And today, we have one of the most awesome relationships I'm in, right? It's because of their example, right? And their example of Christ. And the cool thing is that whether you're where I was at, and you're doing a lot of the stuff that's wrong, and you're doing a lot of the stuff that's messed up, or maybe they're there. Maybe they're the ones that are making mistakes, and they're the ones who are, doing messed up, or maybe it's this back and forth thing. But regardless, whenever we follow Christ's example, it changes people forever. It'll change your family forever, and it'll change your family dynamic forever. And it's seriously one of the coolest things ever to do life with people and see them change right in front of you. And you can play a big role in that just by being kind, compassionate, and forgiving. Right. So that's what we're called to do. And I know it's not easy. I know it's difficult. But we have a place to kind of talk about this and unpack it, and that's in small groups. So whenever you go to small groups tonight, kind of talk about the stuff like, what's the stuff that maybe you need to seek forgiveness for, or you need to forgive. What's the stuff that's frustrating? What's the stuff that makes you angry? And what's it look like to kind of move on from that?